In a small room at a university, a mother sits face to face with her 1-year-old daughter. For 3 minutes, she does what mothers do. She smiles, she points. She copies the sounds the baby makes and hands them back. The baby lights up, kicks her legs, points at things so her mother will look. It is the oldest conversation on Earth, and neither of them has said a word. Then the researcher gives a signal. The mother turns her face away for a moment, and when she turns back, her face is completely blank. She is still there. Same chair, same distance, eyes open, looking right at her daughter. She simply does not respond to anything. Watch what the baby does, because it happens in a very specific order. First, she smiles, harder than before. The old signal must have been too quiet, so she sends it again, bigger. Nothing comes back. So she points. She shrieks. She reaches out with both hands. She does the thing that has always worked, over and over, faster. Nothing comes back. Then she starts to lose her posture. She curls in on herself. She turns away, then whips back to check, then away again. Her hands come up around her body. By the end of 2 minutes, she is screaming. 2 minutes. That is all it takes. Not neglect over months. Not abuse, just a face that is present and unresponsive for 120 seconds. The experiment is called the still face, and Edward Tronick has been running versions of it since the 1970s. It is one of the most reliably devastating things you can watch on a psychology reel, and it is showing you something people find very hard to accept about themselves. You are not built to need people nearby. You are built to need people who react. That distinction is the whole video, so hold on to it. Proximity is not the nutrient. Response is. And now think about how many hours of your day you spend in front of faces that do not respond, or respond just enough to keep you sending signals. Because here is where it gets strange. On paper, you are the most connected human being who has ever lived. You are carrying a device that can reach almost any person on this planet in under a second. You have more names in your contacts than your great-grandmother met in her entire life. You can watch a stranger cry in a country you will never visit. And measured loneliness has been climbing for decades. The United States Surgeon General issued a formal public health advisory about it, and the framing is worth hearing properly because it was not written as a mood piece. It was written the way health authorities write about smoking. The physical numbers are the part that stops people. Analyses pooling hundreds of studies and millions of participants find that chronic loneliness carries a mortality risk in the same range as heavy smoking. It raises the odds of heart disease and stroke. It is not a feeling that sits politely inside your head. It gets into the body. So we have to ask the obvious question. How can connection go up and connection go down at the same time? The answer is that we measured the wrong thing. We counted contacts. The body was counting something else entirely. Let us go to the machinery, because this is where it becomes concrete. When you sit across from another person, an enormous amount happens that neither of you notices. Your pupils adjust to theirs. Your posture drifts toward theirs. If the conversation goes well, your speech rhythms begin to line up, and in some settings, even your heart rates and breathing start to drift into step. Researchers can measure this synchrony, and the more of it there is, the closer both people report feeling afterwards. None of that requires effort. None of it requires words. It is a second channel running underneath the conversation, and it has been running for millions of years. Physical presence also does something chemically. Warm contact with someone you trust, a hand on your arm, a hug that lasts longer than a beat, is associated with oxytocin release and a measurable drop in the stress hormone cortisol. Being genuinely comforted by a person who is there is one of the few reliable ways to bring a nervous system down. Now hold a phone in your hand and try to name which of those things is happening. Not the pupils, not the posture, not the breathing, not the touch. The synchrony channel is simply off. You are receiving the words and almost none of the signal that used to come with them, and your body, which was never told that anything changed, keeps waiting for the rest of the delivery. Which brings us to the number that gets quoted constantly, and it is worth being precise about because it is real and it is not what most people think it is. In 2010, a team led by Sarah Conrath at the University of Michigan pooled 72 studies of American college students stretching back to 1979, all using the same standard empathy questionnaire. Two things had fallen sharply. Empathic concern, which is the tendency to feel warmth and concern for other people, and perspective taking, which is the habit of imagining how a situation looks from inside someone else's head. The combined drop was around 40%, and it was steepest after the year 2000. Now, be careful with that. It is self-reported. It is one country. It is students. Researchers still argue about how far it generalizes. But notice what it is not. It is not a claim that anyone's genes changed. 40 years is nothing in evolutionary time. Not one nucleotide moved. What changed was practice. Perspective taking is a skill. It behaves like a skill. It gets better when you use it, and worse when you do not. And for most of human history, you had no choice but to use it constantly, because you were surrounded by people whose faces you had to read in real time in order to survive the afternoon. Now you can go a whole day without doing it once. And this is where I want to be careful, because there is a very popular explanation for all of this that is mostly wrong. You will hear that mirror neurons have broken, that your brain has a dedicated empathy cell that no longer fires for people outside your bubble. Mirror neurons are real, first found in macaque monkeys in the 1990s, and they were genuinely exciting. But the pop science version raced far ahead of the evidence, and the simple story of an empathy cell that switches off does not hold up. What does hold up is quieter and, I think, more disturbing. Put someone in a scanner and show them a needle going into a stranger's hand. The regions that handle the unpleasantness of their own pain light up. It is a real physical flinch that they did not choose. Now change one thing. Make the hand belong to someone they see as being outside their group. The response drops. Not to zero, but measurably, consistently, across a range of studies using different kinds of group boundaries. Nobody decides to do this. Nobody is aware of it happening. The flinch is simply smaller, and the person it is happening inside would honestly tell you they treat everyone the same. So the machinery does not break, it narrows. And once you know it narrows around whoever your brain has filed as your people, you have to ask a very uncomfortable question about the last 15 years. What have we been feeding it? An algorithm has one job: keep you here. It learns which faces and which opinions hold your attention, and it brings you more of those and less of everything else, and it does this so smoothly that it feels like the world simply is that shape. The result is not that you hate the people outside it. It is that they slowly stop having interiors. They become positions, accounts, examples of a category. And the flinch that would have fired if they were sitting in front of you, breathing with a face you had to read, gets a little quieter every year. Which brings us to the newest part of this story, and the part almost nobody has a clear opinion on yet. We have started building companions that always respond. An AI companion never turns its face blank. It never gets bored of your problem. It never brings up its own bad day at the wrong moment, never misreads you, never needs anything. And for some people, in some situations, that genuinely helps. If you are isolated at 3 in the morning, something that answers warmly is not nothing. Early studies on companion apps do find short-term reductions in reported loneliness. That should be said plainly rather than sneered at. But look at what has been removed, because it is the exact thing that used to do the work. Human connection was expensive. Somebody had to choose you over the other things they could have been doing. They had to sit through a story they had heard before. They had to tolerate you on a bad day. The cost was not a flaw in the system. The cost was the signal. Being chosen only means something when choosing you was hard. An AI has no competing options and no capacity to be inconvenienced. It cannot choose you because there is nothing else it would rather be doing. So you can be attended to perfectly and still not be chosen, and the part of you that is keeping score notices even when you do not. There is a phrase people reach for when they try to describe how this feels, and it is not a medical diagnosis, but as a metaphor, it is very good. A phantom limb. When someone loses an arm, the map of that arm is still in the brain, and it goes on reporting. People feel an itch in a hand that is not there. They reach for objects with fingers that are gone. The map outlasts the limb. And a lot of people are walking around with a map of a village they have never actually had. Faces they saw daily without arranging it. People who noticed when they went quiet. A group that would have registered their absence within a day. Your brain still holds the shape of that. It is still budgeting for it. It is still expecting a certain volume of unplanned, unearned in-person contact, and when that never arrives, what you feel is an ache with no obvious cause, in a place you cannot point to. So, is empathy going extinct? No, and the honest answer is more useful than the frightening one. Extinction would mean the capacity is gone from the species. It is not. It cannot be in this time frame. The circuits you were born with are the same circuits your great-grandparents were born with. What is happening is atrophy, and atrophy has a property that extinction does not. It reverses. A muscle that has not been used is not a missing muscle. It is an untrained one. Every study that has looked at deliberate perspective-taking, at sustained face-to-face contact, at cooperation between groups who need each other, finds the same thing. The response comes back, sometimes quickly, which means the practical version of all this is smaller than the problem sounds. Not a movement, not deleting anything. Just noticing the difference between contact that costs somebody something and contact that costs nobody anything, and making sure you are still getting some of the first kind. One conversation a week where the other person could have been somewhere else. One where you can see their face change in real time. One where nobody is performing for an audience because there is no audience. That is not nostalgia. It is maintenance. Because the baby in that room was not screaming about being alone. Her mother was right there, close enough to touch, perfectly available. She was screaming because the face was not answering. And every single one of us is still running that same software in a world that has become extremely good at showing us faces and quietly terrible at answering. That is all for this one. If it made you think differently, subscribe. There is a new one every week. Tell me what to pull apart next.